Communism is a political theory derived from Karl Marx that advocates for class war and leads to a society in which each person works and is paid according to their own individual abilities and needs. According to those that advocate for communism, the ultimate goal is to establish a communist utopia in which there would be no unemployment, no desire for war, and no exploitation of one man by another. Despite these optimistic promises, this political theory has seen its fair share of criticism and backlash. Why would such a seemingly fantastic theory produce such results? The answer lies in the fall of the Soviet Union. The fall of the Soviet Union was provoked by an increase in poverty, corruption, and a decrease in hope for the communist system. The primary reason for the fall of the Soviet Union was poverty. Poverty was a main effect of the communist regime following the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917. This was due to the redistribution of wealth, which wreaked such havoc on the economy that the monthly wage of a factory worker in Omsk was a measly 40 rubles a month. With inflation taken into account, the equivalent of this wage in American currency is around $1,400, which is $800 less than the wage of an average factory worker in the United States today. To further exacerbate this issue, these horrid wages were anything but seldom in the Soviet Union. Approximately more than 43 million people lived in families with an income of less than 75 rubles a month per person. Repulsively low wages such as these played a pivotal role in instigating the ultimate failure of the communist state. Another contributor to the economic turmoil was the implementation of Lenin's surplus food appropriation policy in 1921. This policy assigned a certain amount of the peasants' produce to the state, from where it would be redistributed to the rest of the country. This appears to be a valid idea theoretically, but once it was put into practice, the entire country soon faced a famine and the government was helpless to fix it. This policy represented a shift in the ideology of the Soviet government from a primarily agricultural economy to one of industry. As a result of this shift, Soviets left their farmsteads in masses to join the working class. The combination of shallow wages and Lenin's policy on agriculture led to a very large increase in death by starvation. Starvation became so commonplace that one Soviet citizen lamented that it occurred too frequently to bother about it. Even Omsk, one of the most populated cities in Russia, was hit specifically hard. Its population died day by day, and within the year of 1932, it was surpassed by Novosibirsk, the new communist capital of Siberia. The drastic increase of death brought to light that the preconceived idealistic utopia was simply that, idealistic. The mentioned statistics and figures reveal the extent of poverty that Soviets were forced to endure under the brutal communist regime. The drastic increase of misfortune, in tandem with economic struggle, led the Soviet government to abuse their power. A couple years following communism's implementation, the government controlled everything in an attempt to create a classless society. All Soviets, regardless of their political allegiances, were consigned into being government workers, whether they were a politician, a bus driver, a doctor, or a writer. This totalitarian mindset of a Soviet government exemplifies the lengths that others will go when hiding behind the veil of a good cause. As is the natural tendency of humans, the government yearned for more control. By 1945, newspapers and television were both tightly controlled by the government and published only political views in line with communism. Sadly, this censorship even extended as far as the arts. Sculptors and writers created and wrote in only approved government styles. These actions portray the wickedness taken by the government in order to designate what is a right or wrong way to think. Now, not only did the government have a monopoly on production, but on mere thought as well. To make matters worse, those who were reported as disagreeing with communist ideology were sent to Siberian prisons called gulags. These rebellious thoughts were not particularly uncommon either. Multiple Soviet citizens have been quoted saying that they were prisoners of the state. And being prisoners to the state is especially ironic, considering that one of the reasons that the Bolsheviks initially revolted was to reform the government and liberate the people. This action demonstrates a shift from a humanitarian ideology to one of a dictatorial foundation. With these actions from the Soviet government taken into account, there are undeniable examples of corruption and despotism. As a result of communism's glaring failures, the faith of the people for a communist utopia faded into oblivion. As mentioned previously, communism was initially implemented for the liberation of the people. When looking back on this propaganda with hindsight, there exists a very stark dichotomy between theory and application. According to the personal testimony of a Soviet, before the revolution, some of us were poor. Others were neither poor nor rich. Others were rich. Now we are all poor. In those days we had food to eat, and today the people starve. Another Soviet secretly confessed that he hated this new utopia, and said that he would give an arm to go to America. These personal confessions give a glimpse into the mind of a Soviet citizen. The very economic structure they had once revolted for was now seen as a colossal failure in their eyes. This skepticism continually evolved until the fall of the Berlin Wall on November 8, 1989. When the wall was ordered down, people were seen singing and dancing on top of the wall itself, reuniting on top of the once harsh symbol of division. Finally, after the culmination of all these issues caused by the oppressive communist regime, the Soviet Union dissolved on December 31, 1991. The fall of the Berlin Wall and the ending of the Soviet Union both symbolize the ultimate failure of the communist theory. With the evidences above, one cannot deny the substantial loss of faith through the duration of the oppressive communist regime. With the aforementioned demonstrations, it is impossible to ignore the poverty, corruption, and gradual decrease of communist hope inside the Soviet Union. Thanks to the Soviet populace, modern-day Russia has departed far from its communist ways, now proclaims itself to be capitalist. From the failures of communism, one can learn the importance of a theory as opposed to an action. Hopefully the world will never again become a witness to the impractical theory of communism.